Hi, everyone. Gene here. Just as a reminder, this is your last chance to get the Take Action Now program at a discount where you will learn really specific tools that you can use and then how to apply those tools to the 4 areas of why we don't take action so it becomes really easy for you to move forward. There's lots of great instruction. There's some amazing tap-alongs. There's tapping scripts that you're able to download. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/take-action-now. That's tappingqa.com/take-action-now. Tapping. We've added a new service so that you can subscribe to the podcast right from your 5-digit number. Text to 33444. You will receive a text message back, which will give you a link if you're on an Apple device or an Android device, so you can subscribe to the podcast right on your phone without taking any other steps, visiting a website. It is just that easy. Finally, if you didn't check it out, in episode 320 through 326, I went through a 7-part series on how you can tap to eliminate self-sabotage. Each one of the audios also includes a tapping script that you can print out. All you need to do is go to tappingpodcast.com and you will see episodes 320 through 326 where you'll get that free series. This is Gene Monterastelli. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 328, originally aired September 12th, 2018. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Today, we're going to have a conversation about how we learn from the world, how that impacts the way we understand ourselves in the world, and how that specifically can get in the way of a healing and transformational process. And we'll kind of break that down into details. And at the end, we're going to do a little tapping to make it easier for you to move forward in a way that is useful and helpful. If you were on the mailing list a couple of days ago, you saw the note that I sent out talking about how we are completely reworking the way the podcast is supported. Oftentimes in the show, you'll hear me say, if you'd like to support the podcast, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support. Well, if you do that, there are a number of free gifts that you receive by supporting the podcast. Some of them include time with me. Some of them include me creating a custom tapping script just for you for anything that you want. And there are 2 new things that we have added. The first one is every single month, people who are supporting the podcast, regardless of the level that you are supporting the podcast at, you are going to get access to a bonus podcast where I answer your questions. I talk about client sessions, and I'm actually talking about the practical application of tapping an EFT, which will make you a better tapper. The very first podcast is going to be released on the 24th of this month for only supporters. So if you go to tappingqa.com/support, you will have access to that. The other change that we made is that 10% of the support that comes in for the podcast is actually going to go to Kiva. Kiva is an organization that does microloans to people all over the world who couldn't normally get loans so they can build their small business or improve their lives. And so all of the people who supported the Tapping Q&A podcast in the month of September, part of that support actually went to a man in Mozambique who is taking care of 2 ill parents and has had to move them into his house. And so the small loan that he is receiving is giving him the tools and the resources so he can build on extra rooms so it is easier and more comfortable for his ailing elderly parents to be able to take care of them. So this is an opportunity for you to support the great work that the podcast is doing, but you're also getting a chance collectively getting the opportunity to make a difference all over the world. Again, tappingqa.com/support. So the topic that I wanted to talk about today, and this is something that has come up in a number of client sessions over the last few weeks. And as I kind of sat down to make some notes and think about this in a clear way and how I wanted to teach it and how I wanted to share it, this is actually a conversation I have really regularly with my clients. And that is around the idea of how we learn the lessons about ourselves and how we learn the lessons about how the world works. And this becomes significant in tapping because oftentimes when we are tapping on a limiting belief where we're trying to change the way that we see ourselves or the world, what we're doing is we're trying to change a belief that we picked up somewhere along the way. That when I am working with a client and they're struggling with self-belief or self-esteem or whatever the issue is, almost never did the belief that they are not good enough or they are not capable enough or they're not present enough came from a vacuum. That it was learned somewhere along the way. And when we understand the hows and the whys of that learning process, what it does is it equips us to be better tappers because it helps us to see what exactly we're looking for, and it helps us to see how we can unearth those problems and transform them. So we learn from experience. And this is a really good thing because what that does is it means that every single moment of the day, we have the opportunity to get new data from our experience or from the way those around us act. When we're particularly young, we do lots and lots of learning by watching the people who are closest to us. That's how we learn how to manage the world. I mean, as an example of this, if you've ever done any sort of tapping around money issues, if you're working with a good practitioner, one of the first questions a practitioner will ask you is, what is the stories that your parents told about money? How did they talk about money? Because we're picking up from what is going on. And so we learn the younger we are or the newer the experience, the more likely we are to be learning. So the first time I do something, I'm in super learning mode. The 800th time I'm doing something, I'm relying significantly more on my past experience than what is in front of me, because I might have one experience in front of me, but I have 800 experiences in my past. And so those past experiences carry more weight. So what this means is that obviously we learn a huge amount of stuff from our parents. And part of this is because of how close we are to them. Part of it is because they're the ones that are actually taking care of us and making us feel safe when we are young, hopefully. And so we're going to lean on them more. And because when we are the youngest, we have the least amount of experience. So we are these giant learning sponges. So all of the experiences we're having are new, therefore we're processing them and we're learning languages, or we're learning lessons from that. And so that means we have the largest portion of lessons about ourselves and about the world are going to be coming from those people we spent the most time with. And for most of us, that was our parents. Now, basically, in this, when I say parents, I mean primary caregiver when you're young. It could have been, it could have been a guardian. It could have been an aunt or an uncle. It could have been a grandparent, depending on where you were growing up. But I'm just going to use parent as shorthand as we navigate all of this. So this is good that we have someone in front of us who is constantly demonstrating how the world works. But those people aren't necessarily realizing that's what is going on, that they think certain moments are teaching things, but they may not understand that we're constantly learning from them. So there's a couple of ways in which we can learn lessons at that age in which we aren't learning good, useful lessons for us. So the first reason that these lessons might not be useful is when we are so young, we are dependent. And the people who are acting around us as if we are dependent. So we're not learning about the world as the primary agent of change or the person who is in control of what's going on, but we're learning as a dependent. Therefore, some of the lessons that when we are learning very young about being dependent upon others or needing permission from others or needing validation from others might be true when we are 5, but is much less true when we are 25. But because we are having those lessons carved into our subconscious, we bring them to a later date. So some of those lessons are problematic because we are dependent when we are learning them. The second reason why some of these lessons that we learn are not always useful is our parents aren't perfect. And even if you were in a circumstance where you grew up with the kindest, most loving, most attentive, most present parent in the world, they are still in a situation where they are making mistakes and they're not fully present to that role every single moment of the day. And they might think that they are not teaching us in a particular moment because of whatever is going on. But the reality is, because we are so dependent at that point in our life, we're constantly watching every single thing they say and do. And so we're picking up lessons from them, not only when they are at their best, but also when they're in the middle of struggle and they might not be making the best choices they want to make. The third reason why it is difficult for us, or we learn lessons that aren't perfect from that really young age, is because we don't understand the world clearly. We oftentimes pick up lessons because we perceive things to be dangerous that aren't, but we don't know that's the case. And here's an actual example that years ago came up when I was working with a client. We got back to a memory where a client was 4 years old and she was sitting in her living room. And what really happened was mom and dad were having a conversation and dad needed to move the car to the back of the house. And so while they were having the conversation, mom just jumped in the car with dad as they drove the car around to the back of the house so they could continue that conversation. What the child perceived was mom and dad are getting in a car and driving away and leaving me alone, and was left an emotional wreck. Now, 15 seconds later, when the car had been pulled around and mom and dad had walked back in and they found crying child, they quickly comforted crying child to let her know she wasn't alone and that she was safe. And so in that moment, she stopped feeling scared. But she had this really extreme experience of mom and dad leaving her behind and making the world feel less safe. Now, one instant like that is not enough to make us feel unsafe in the world, but it becomes one more piece of data that we learn at a small age that I am dependent on others and they can just drive away from me. And so the lesson that we are learning isn't an accurate lesson of what's going on because we are so young and we don't understand what is going on. And we're writing the lessons into our subconscious mind based on our understanding as a small child. Other ways that our experience can actually lead us astray in the lessons that we learn, and this could be in any circumstance. One of the things that we do is we can overgeneralize our experience. And an example of this is, think of a small child who is trying to pet a dog and accidentally steps on the dog's tail or steps on the dog's foot, and the dog yelps at them just for a moment. And the dog's just trying to protect himself, and the moment comes and goes very, very quickly. But it becomes this experience where it was bad with this creature. And what we do is, it is possible for us to overgeneralize that experience to say all dogs are bad or all dogs are scary. Now, fortunately, there is something called the critical factor that sits at the front of our subconscious mind, which prevents us from taking every single experience we have and generalizing it into all of our experiences. If that didn't exist, every time we had something happen, we would rewrite our subconscious mind. Like, I accidentally burned my finger on a candle, therefore I'm scared of candles forever. Like, I have burned myself before, but I haven't overgeneralized that experience. We are much more likely to overgeneralize our experience if it is something that is new, or if we're experiencing it when we're really, really young. So because, again, the way that we are taking the data of the lessons and we're applying it can cause problems for us. The other way that our experience can impact the way we see the world in a way that is inaccurate is we have a tendency to remember the things that are unusual. And when we remember the things that are unusual more strongly, they carry more weight inside of our head. So as an example, I have lived in New York City a little more than 5 years. I live in a 6th floor walk-up, which means every single time I have to go back to my apartment after leaving is I have to walk up 78 stairs to get to my apartment every single time. The co-working space that I work in, if I am not on the first floor, I never use the elevator. So I walk up and down stairs. The New York City subway system, many of the stations do not have escalators. And so you're walking up and down stairs. So since moving to New York, I walk up and down more stairs than I have at any other point in my life. And as I think about all of the times I've walked up and down stairs, there are only 4 memories that come to mind. The first one is I was looking at my mail as I was walking up my stairs, and I live on the top floor of my building, but the staircase continues up to the roof, and there's a motion sensor. And I was literally reading my mail, and I wasn't paying attention to what was going on, and I walked right past my floor, and as I went up the next 4 steps, the alarm went off. The second time that I can remember when I think of this is when I was walking up the stairs in my apartment and my feet slipped and I fell and I cut open my shin. The third time I was walking up the stairs of my apartment, I stumbled and I dropped a gallon of milk and it burst and it went everywhere and I can create a giant mess. The fourth memory I have is walking up 3 steps in a coffee shop called the Freehold. And as I was walking up, I stumbled and ended up spilling coffee. Fortunately, not on anybody, but it was a little bit embarrassing early in the morning, dropping a glass cup of coffee and making a lot of noise and making a mess. So in more than 5 years, multiple times a day, I walk up and down stairs. And I do not remember any of the times that I walked up and down stairs successfully. So much so, where I'm currently recording this, I'm the ground level at my co-working space. And before hitting record, I had to go up to my desk on the first floor. And moments ago, I did that. And I have no recollection of walking up and down those stairs. And so all of this is to point to the fact that when things go as planned, we don't remember them. When things don't go as planned or something goes wrong, we remember them. And because we only remember the extreme, it's easy for us to take the extreme and turn it into our understanding of the world. Now, fortunately, I don't generalize those 4 experiences on the stairs into what walking up downstairs were, or I'd be like clutching handrails every single time I walked up and down the stairs. But that doesn't mean that doesn't happen. I have clients all the time where, as we are investigating an emotional issue, one of the questions when we're interrogating an emotional response is, what experience do you have that means that this is true? And they will tell me a single story of something that happened once. And it could be things that have happened hundreds of times. But the emotion is looking to that one experience as the proof as to why it is the way that it is. And so we overgeneralize from our extremes. When we overgeneralize it, what we end up doing is we only remember the extremes. And when we only remember the extremes, we get a disproportionate sense of what's going on. So you can see there is this whole host of ways that we get pieces of data that are unuseful. We get lessons from people who are imperfect. We learn lessons when we are not fully formed. We overgeneralize our experience. We only remember the extreme experiences. And so on one level, that might feel like it's fraught. Like we're just constantly learning bad lessons and that's a problem. And that's not actually true. Again, we're talking about the extremes so we can do transformation. But because we know that this is the case, it now gives us access to talk to those beliefs in a way that helps us to release them a lot quicker. Because they're these lessons that we cling to because they're the way we define the world and they keep us safe. And so I'm clinging to this lesson that is from my own experience. It might be an inaccurate lesson, but a lesson that I've gleaned from my own experience. And I don't want to let it go because I don't want to diminish and let go of my own experience and to say my experience was wrong. And again, this isn't a conscious thought, but something that shows up. Or we might recognize that we were given a really particular lesson from someone in our life who was really important to us. And if we let go of that learning, it feels as if we are saying they are wrong or we are letting go of them. And so because of this, it makes it difficult for us to release and let go of and transform these beliefs. So what this means is this gives us the opportunity, by looking through this lens, to transform our beliefs much easier. Because instead of trying to talk ourselves out of a belief that we picked up when we were a child and proving to that belief that it is wrong, by acknowledging the context in which we learned that belief, it gives us the ability to let it go. And that's the way that I always like to think about this, is I'm not trying to transform a belief from one belief to another, because you know how hard it is to convince someone of something they really believe is not true. Instead, the way I like to approach this is these lessons that I learned along the way are tools that I have picked up. And I picked them up because I thought it was the safest and healthiest way for me to navigate the world. And sometimes those lessons actually did keep us safe in the past. You know, as a very young person, if you were living in a household of someone who is bipolar, you learned the lesson that I always need to be on guard because I have no idea who is going to be walking through the front door at the end of the workday. And so that was a really valuable lesson. But if you take that lesson into your life thinking, every person I interact with, I need to have my head in the swivel because I don't know who is walking through the door, that lesson is no longer useful. So it's not an issue of learning the things that are wrong and now learning the things that are right, but instead, when we recognize the context in which we learn the lesson, and we recognize why we were using that lesson, and we recognize why it is no longer useful, while tapping, it becomes really easy to put it down and let it go. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to do a little tapping to demonstrate in a general way how I would do this. If you know the specific belief that you're wanting to let go of, you can tune into it. And as a reminder, as we're doing all of this, tapping is something that does have amazing benefits, but make sure that you are doing it in a safe way. And if you have any questions about it, make sure you are talking to your primary care physician before you do something like this. So if you have an issue or a belief that you've picked up about yourself or the world that is unuseful, I want you to tune into it. If not, just think of tools in general and this will work for you. So tap on the side of your hand, take a nice big deep breath. And just move from tapping point to tapping point and repeat after me. I have picked up a belief about myself or the world that is not useful. And actually makes my life harder day to day. And as I acknowledge that this is no longer useful, I am not blaming myself for picking up this tool. I am not blaming myself for picking up this belief. When I picked up this belief, I thought it was something that would truly serve me. I am also not blaming the people who gave me this belief. They were doing the best that they could when they were teaching me. I also do not blame them because they might not have realized they were teaching me in that moment. They were doing the best that they could, and I was writing lessons from that. I give myself permission to let go of this belief because it is a tool that is no longer useful to me. I now recognize a more useful way to navigate the world. I now recognize a more useful way to respond to my problems. And if some point in the future I need this belief again, I am allowed to pick it back up. But if I choose to pick it back up, I am doing so consciously because it is useful. It is also possible, but I never pick up this belief again. I acknowledge the beliefs I have about myself and the world. Were picked up with all good intention. But they are no longer useful now. When I picked them up in the past, I was doing the best that I could. And letting go of them now is doing the best that I can right now. It is okay for me to let go of these experiences. It is safe for me to let go of these beliefs. What is most important is not my past. Instead, what I choose to believe right now. And I give myself permission to believe what is useful right now. Nice deep breath. Now, again, that was done in a slightly general way because I don't know the exact issue that you were tapping for. And if we knew what it was, we could speak into that directly. And if we knew who gave it to us, we could speak into that directly. But you can see inside of that, basically what I'm doing is I'm stating everything that I taught before we tapped. I'm naming, this is the reason why I picked this thing up. And I picked it up in this way and it is no longer useful and therefore I can let go of it. And by thinking it in that terms, we're not blaming, we're not fighting with ourselves, we're not trying to convince ourselves to change. Instead, we're just saying, this isn't useful. I'm going to pick up something else. And if it's useful, I'll get it again. And I found that to be a really gentle way for us to have transformation. Because if we don't acknowledge where it came from and why it is there, oftentimes it becomes really difficult to let it go because it feels so valuable and it feels so important because our system thought, rightly or wrongly, it was keeping us safe for a really long time. So give that a go. If the tapping script was a little too general, let me know. I would love to hear your experience with that and how that shapes and reframes your tapping, or if it's not useful at all. I'm trying to make this a better thing. You can always reach me directly. I can be reached at Gene, Gene, at tappingqa.com. If you happen to be listening to this in the website, just click on the the contact us link up above. If you haven't done so already, please sign up for our 10 free part guide on how you can eliminate self-sabotage. There's tapping scripts, there's audios, there's instruction, much like stuff we talked about today, but around that really specific idea. tappingqna.com, click on the big blue button. If you happen to be listening to this in the website, up in the right-hand corner, you can see the button. Click on it there. If you know someone in your life who could use this information, please be our ambassador. I say this all the time, but it's true. The most common way someone finds a podcast is off of the recommendation of a friend. So you are the most valuable resource in your friends' lives in being able to find audio that is good and useful to them. If you think this is one of those audios, please, please, please be our ambassador. Pass it along. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.